Come on. There we go. We're live. We should be. Come on, YouTube. Please don't do this to me.
Well, it looks like we're live. There's just a bit of a delay, I think.
Yeah, okay, we're good. We're good now. All right, folks, it's me and Rucka. This is going to be interesting. I hope. I think most of what we're going to cover is just the kind of a discussion and criticisms of the Atlas Shrugged review I did. Where to begin? I suppose let's start with your big criticisms. Like, where do you think I went wrong?
So I can tell. Like, I'm tweeting about this live stream, by the way. I say this at the beginning of every, like, interview or live stream. I'm always like, yeah, I'm on my phone or I'm typing. It's not lack of respect for your program.
Oh, no problem, dude. No problem.
So I could tell right as you started talking about the book, and this was a couple weeks ago, but I could tell right off the bat, you were approaching it from this sort of Marxist approach in not in Marxist as in like we're communists, let's do the like kind of like taking the capitalist side of that struggle. So there's still a class conflict, and there's still a there's still like everyone's still part of a group,
right?
But, that was kind of what kind of struck me right away. So there is no class conflict there. The only conflicts are between individuals.
Right.
And there shouldn't be. I mean, yeah, there's there's conflicts between different ideological groups and all that, but there's no, you're not inherently at odds with people who make a different amount of money than you or are at a different level of productive ability. So it is easy when you read Atlas Shrugged to walk away thinking that what Rand was saying is that there's this elite group of capitalists, this elite group of industrialists that we all owe them so much that we better do what they say or something like that, which is
okay.
I mean, there is an extent to which that is true. I mean, Thomas Edison gave us so much. If he were still alive, I mean, we wouldn't owe him like our slave labor, but I think morally, people like Edison and other magnificent innovators and productive industrialists, inventors, and so on, they implicitly live by a code of values. They implicitly live by a moral code that Rand actually identifies. She says, here is the proper code for living on Earth. And it is, it's based on the primary virtue is reason. So, be rational. And that, of course, these industrialists, they do that as long as they're honest, as long as they're not getting favors from the government and so on.
As long as it's ethical practices, essentially.
Yes, and then the purpose of ethics is to serve yourself, is to preserve your life, to enhance your life, to pursue happiness. The purpose of virtues is to stay alive, and then the purpose of your life is happiness. So these people are living by that code, and because of the prevalent ethics of the ages, which has been altruism. The more they succeed, the more guilty they are, and the more they succeed, the more we resent them for it. The more they succeed, the more they owe us by that code.
That was the sort of bullshit I'd get from my university professors. It's like, this guy's rich, we should hate him for some reason.
Yeah, but what I got from listening to your review of Atlas Shrugged is that your professors still won this. They still won in that they got you to think in certain terms where you're still looking at society as in like different bodies at odds or different functions,
different groups in a sort of struggle.
Institutions. Okay. This one drives me crazy. Institutions, when people talk about institutions as though an institution is somehow greater than the sum of the individuals that are operating within it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's in academia, they definitely sort of train you. Well, they train you to disintegrate and to not tie things together. There's a lot of ways in which academia ruins your mind. But one of the things that I noticed that they do is that they sort of teach you about the world as in, different. There's more than meets the eye, right? Like they think they're red pilling you. Like, because you look at your life, you're a person, you think for yourself, you think independently, you're not hearing other people's thoughts, so therefore you can assume they're not hearing your thoughts. So every individual person functions on his own, and then the only way we can associate is by communicating, and then by voluntarily associating in some way, trading or working together, whatever, sharing, whatever it is we're doing.
So long as it's reciprocal. I did get a strong sense of reciprocity from.
That was when I noticed you bring up reciprocity as though that's like the main point of that. Like that, reciprocity is a big thing, but that's not the essential, I don't think.
Right.
But not the ultimate essential. But so something they do in school is they teach you to suddenly like kind of wipe everything clean and say like, okay, here's what's really going on. Different institutions communicate. You're part of an institution. You're part of an in-group. And you signal. Like I took a communications class. I wanted to be a better speaker. I wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
What did they spend all their time teaching me about? Just like, oh, you signal. You send signals. I mean, yes, we do signal. There is a reason. There is, I think, merit in studying signals, but there's a very materialistic approach to these things that these academics take, because materialism is the secular approach in the last couple hundred years. So you've got religion, which of course is based on the supernatural, and then you've got materialism, which says that people are essentially unthinking, that our thoughts and our consciousness are really just an illusion. Because what's consciousness? It's just your body having some squirts. It's just your rationalization for
some
decision.
Strange chemicals that say you do this thing or that thing.
Right.
But there's more to it. There's a lot more to it than that.
Of course, consciousness is self-evident. I mean, these academics, and you see this with the new atheists, the skeptics, all these people who profess to being men of science. They are. Well, but I mean, and you do have guys like Sam Harris saying like, oh no, I'm conscious. That's the most self-evident thing. But however, he also doesn't believe in free will. So
that's a strange dichotomy.
So what I think from him and others like him is that they're saying you have consciousness, but now the purpose of science properly is to explain what this consciousness is, because it can't just be that you're conscious, that you're obviously not. You have no free will. You're an animal just like all the others. So it's evolution, or it's your quote environment, or it's
you kind of locked up on me there.
Oh,
did I lose you?
Do you hear me?
Oh yeah, I hear you now. You're good. You're good.
What was I saying?
Last thing was it's evolution, and then
so it's evolution, or it's genetics, or it's environment, and all these things that are causing you to experience this consciousness, but it's ultimately got to be an illusion. So other than Rand, there is, to my knowledge, nobody, at least nobody who wrote very much or who's very outspoken, nobody secular who believes in complete free will, what they call libertarian free will, like that you have a complete blank slate where you're able to assess your options, focus, and make a decision. So again, you've got the religious thinkers, and by the way, some of these religious thinkers are magnificent philosophers of the ages, magnificent integrated academics or just intellectuals. These are not just monks sitting around depriving themselves of earthly pleasure. And I mean, like there have been many big intellectuals who have been of the religious persuasion. So again,
take Jordan Peterson, for instance. He's blown up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess he's like half religious. He's like sort of living in both the world of evolutionary determinism, where evolution drove everything that we see behind us, but also he's saying he's got these religious influences. But so I see Peterson as sort of like the meeting of these two worlds.
I have to say there's some things I've noticed. Like I went to see him in Seattle the other week, and I couldn't help it as he's talking. I'm like, that sounds like Rand. I know he doesn't consider Rand to be a great mind, but at the same time, some of the things he says, they don't fall in lockstep with. I know he's read Atlas Shrugged. I know he's read a lot of her works, but It's weird. Just some of the things that he says are not in lockstep, but they're very similar to things that have popped up in Atlas Shrugged or in Virtue of Selfishness, for instance. It's I think it's kind of an unshakable truth, shall we say? I don't quite know how to put it.
What is an unshakable truth?
What was it? I'm trying to think of something he said specifically. Oh, this was a week ago, of course, and I was half drunk at the time. Well, there's obviously the
okay, but so I guess
that doesn't help anything, does it?
So anyway, but I'll just finish my.
Yeah, please do.
So basically, you've got the thinkers who believe in free will. They believe that your consciousness is yours, and you are thinking, and you are able to make decisions, and there is a right and there is a wrong decision. You know, moral, good and evil. But but that ultimately comes from God. And then you've got the atheists, or just the materialists, the secular thinkers, who they say, all right, forget all that religious stuff. We are men of science. We don't, we don't have time for any of that free will nonsense. We don't even really think you're really conscious. And the more I learn about the history of philosophy, and I had to sort of learn extra because I wrote a song that's kind of going to come out in a week or so, of the history of philosophy. So I had to kind of really clarify this in order to write about it.
Cool.
After Europe sort of rediscovered the Greeks, after Europe kind of came out of the Dark Ages and discovered reason, right? Like they rediscovered reason. Like, yes, reason. Let's find out how reason really works. You had the school of philosophers that were the empiricists. They said you've got your senses. That's how you discover the world. Through your senses. That's kind of what you do. And then you had the rationalists like Descartes, who said, oh no, your senses, you never really know if that's an illusion or not. But your mind, logic, thought, like build on top of your axiom inside of your world of abstractions. That's how you know the truth. So you had philosophers of body like John Locke, and philosophers of mind like Descartes, the empiricists of the body and the rationalists of the mind. And they just kept on getting more and more divorced from one another with every generation, to the point where the mind and the body were just distant. Like you had, like there was just what reason actually should be, says Rand, is you gather material with your senses. That's your starting point of how to know what exists. But when you perceive these things, it's your mind, it's your conceptual faculty. It's you form abstractions. So when I'm talking to you, I now can compute that you are a man or whatever. You are a person. You belong in a certain category with every other person.
Right.
Judging, you speak English, so you belong in a category with everyone else who speaks English. Whatever it is. I'm holding up a water bottle. This belongs in this is a bottle. Bottle is a concept. It's an abstract idea. Every bottle in the world goes into the
single category.
So the mind and the body work together. The purpose of abstractions is to relate to concretes. So it's so simple. I think, it's the more complicated it gets, kind of the more simple it becomes. But the power
once you get to see the whole picture, you can put things together.
But the power of ideas is that if you have brilliant philosophers taking you away from Earth and using ideas and equations to take you away from the world, you end up unable to function. You end up unable to use philosophy to understand the world. Instead, philosophy becomes the opposite. It ends up working against your ability to live and function. And that's just the Enlightenment philosophers. Those are the good guys. Those are the ones that Rand actually likes. She hated Immanuel Kant, and I think most of the philosophers who came after him.
I had to read a lot of Foucault and Derrida and Haraway in my lit theory course, and by the end I was like, what the fuck are you saying? Like I remember we had to read a 20-page essay from Donna Haraway on, I believe the term was socialist feminism, and at no point does she define the term. It's just, we need this, and I'm like, okay, great, this all sounds nice, but why? Just why? You've made no case. I don't understand why I have to buy into this.
Yeah.
Whereas, like having read Virtue, I started going over it again today. What I get from Rand is she's very good at laying something out and presenting it in a way that you can digest and go, okay, I can see why I should employ this. Like I can see why I should live rationally. I can see why I should live. I mean, I keep going back to Reciprocity with Atlas Shrugged, but it's a system that works compared to, like, I'm looking at my my script I wrote for Reciprocity versus Collectivism, which is a shitty title to go on. But I was really trying to compare the way in which Galt's Gulch works compared to the Soviet Union, which is
So
like the fundamental principles that fuel both, and the way in which they are different. And I mean that's obvious, but it was. I think I could have gotten a lot deeper with it. I think after reading Virtue, I'm thinking, wow, I didn't get close.
So, a couple of points. So first off,
Sure, yeah.
reciprocity is an important thing to take note of. I wouldn't see it as the primary lesson to sort of take away. Like when you began your book review by saying that like Rand sees reciprocity as, you know, an essential, or as her morality is like, or something, her philosophy is built on reciprocity or something,
Right.
something
Yeah.
like that. So look, she loved the trader, and this is in Atlas Shrugged, and it's in her other writing. Trade is how people live amongst one another, and in everything. You and I are trading right now in a sense. Material traders, obviously, there's a trillion trades happening every day in romance, in friendship, whatever it is, you are trading, and that is how people must live amongst one another, because the alternative is force, or fraud, to trick people into doing something,
force and fraud.
To do it. So trade is an essential for maybe when it comes to ethics and politics. Well, it's at the later stages of ethics, and then it's certainly an important part of politics, I would say, at, you know, offhand. But like, to sort of sum up her philosophy as beginning with reciprocity. I mean, so her philosophy, like I was talking about, what I was talking about just now with like with reason and how reason works and all that, that's, you know, epistemology, right? That's the word that people, they switch off. Epistemology. It's knowledge. What, you know, how do we know what's real? That's the essential. That's where philosophy needs to begin. And another thing about, you mentioned Galt's Gulch versus,
it's a bit of a tongue twister,
versus the Soviet Union. So I don't think that Galt's Gulch was meant to be like the ideal society. So Galt's Gulch was a bunch of geniuses and a bunch of brilliant, the most civilized people on earth, going to someone's private residence. One man owns that whole thing. It was Midas owns it. And they had like a courthouse to settle disputes and all that, but this was kind of like early stages of what could someday be a society, I suppose, like a civilization. But what Rand actually is advocating for, I think, and what I'm advocating for, is to have a civilized society with a government that has a proper function. That government is there to objectively arbitrate, that is, you know, to apply an objective principle of protecting your rights, of, you know, of protecting you and protecting your rights. I think a lot of like anarchists are inspired by Atlas Shrugged, like by, oh, Galt's Gulch, look at that, see, we don't need government, or we don't, you know, but that's definitely not what Rand was about. She was very hostile to the idea of anarchy.
I know she believed that, at least what I gathered from Virtue, is that she believed government should have a very limited function. So it seemed very, oh man, I want to phrase this right, but it's going to come out wrong. It seems very in line with, oh man, modern conservatism, but that's the wrong way to put it. Maybe. When I was going through all of Virtue, there were some of her views that were in lockstep with conservatism, and at the same time not.
It's hard. It's
hard to place her.
It's hard to place conservatism because it's such a mixed bag in so many ways, in so many cases. I've heard her described as a minarchist, right? Like a minimal, but I don't even like that. I don't even like saying limited government or even small government. We need very clear definitions. The government should have a clear purpose, whether that ends up being a big quote big government with many employees, or it's 5 people, whatever it is. It has a particular purpose that it needs to do effectively, and that purpose is to protect your rights. You should never be living under threat of violence in a free society, not from your neighbor, not from foreign governments or pirates. And if you and I have a contract that we disagree about, they can look at, they're the ones who arbitrate and ultimately say who owes who money or whatever it is. So So government has a particular purpose. It would probably be a small government, and certainly it is limited to what I just described. But to just kind of say like, we don't want government to do too much, or like you hear this a lot. Maybe conservatives say this, certainly libertarians say this. They'll say like, the government fucks up everything they do, so let's not give them control of too much. No, it's not about them not being good at anything. It's about what is their job, what are they there to do. If we put government in charge of engineering society, then of course they're going to be bad at that, because it's an impossible task. If the government's job is to grant favors to some at the cost of others, of course they'll be quote bad at that, because the more good at that they are, the more bad it is. Terrible system. So if the government's job is to abide by the very objective laws that they're there to enforce and to protect the rights of the individual, then I think once we agree that that's the purpose of the government, I have no reason to think that the government couldn't do that effectively. I think historically, in the early stages of America, in fact, when that was the stated purpose,
when the state had constraints, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I mean,
when it was a clear definition.
The clear purpose was stated, then the government was pretty good at that. You had a very free society compared to today's. I mean, economically free and all of that. Obviously, the slavery and all of that is a glaring contradiction to that, and women's rights, whatever, also. But the fact that any individual with no aristocratic connections, with no relationship to a king, with no you could be born poor and die rich in America simply based on the choices you made. Just imagine a world where that had never been done before. And that's what they had. So anyway, putting aside whether or not people believe that a government could effectively protect your rights, Rand was saying that's what a government ought to do.
Right. Yeah, I did get that from the latter chapters of Virtue. I didn't get it in that much detail, but I could clue into that. Coming through the first section again. How many things did I fuck up?
I don't think fuck up is a strong.
Well, I mean, I won't lie. The script took me the better part of 2 months to write, because I was jotting my thoughts down as I was reading Atlas Shrugged the whole time. So I can see that things have changed as I've gone from point A to point B.
Yeah, and look, I mean, when I read this stuff, I was a 18-year-old stoner who wasn't ready to live by any sort of principle like this.
Yeah.
I definitely didn't understand it to a large degree. So, I mean, you're talking to someone who is, 31 and has been sort of slowly chewing on these ideas for about half my life. So,
yeah.
I mean, you're certainly however long ago you read Atlas, you're already taking it a lot more seriously. I think just the fact that you're able to sort of write an essay about it with such coherence.
I hope it's coherent.
Well, I was able to understand what you were saying and kind of tell you why you were missing the point in some cases.
Hey, I appreciate it. Yeah. Most of why I started getting into Rand is I just got sick of hearing the same opinions from my professors. I go to like from A to B to C, and they'd all have the same thing of, we need wealth redistribution, and I'm like, okay, what tell me something new, please. Like, I don't know, just being on a university campus, it didn't fuck me up, but it's just like
You might hear other things from some professors, but they're also going to be sort of in the same context. So you'll have some of them saying that our mixed economy is the ideal, like it's the best we can do. Our mixed economy, as in a mixture of socialism and freedom.
Right.
And those would probably be regarded as the conservative professors. And then you might even have like a free market economist professor who's sort of pushing for free markets and might even speak fondly of Atlas Shrugged. However, pay attention to their philosophic premises. Like if they describe people's actions as almost a natural occurrence, like like the economy behaves this way, and
well, I graduated a couple months ago, so I don't have to worry about that now. But kind of a retrospective thing, because I started Atlas Shrugged at the start of my senior year. After reading the Good Leg Archipelago, I'm like, okay, what else don't they want me to read?
Interesting.
Let's start here. I did start with The Fountainhead. That was a big thing. I mean, I'm a creative writing major, and I had a friend of mine tell me, okay, if you're going to be an artist, you have to read The Fountainhead. No ifs, ands, or buts. You have to.
Oh, that's a good friend.
Yeah, and that really got me thinking about not what I'm doing. I like to write science fiction, go figure, but not what I'm doing, but why I'm doing it, who I'm doing it for. And yeah, that was really helpful when it came to, we'd have these seminars where we'd be workshopping everyone's work, and they get to mine and be like, well, why doesn't your story have women in it? And I'm like, are you seriously asking this question? Because I don't want it to. I'm going to go full Rourke on this and be like, no.
Yeah.
It's
interesting. I mean, yeah, there's so much wrong with them asking you that. I mean, so a lot of people, they see art as a political weapon. They see the purpose of art and literature and music and all that is for political change. I mean, comedy now too. You go to you hang out with these stand-up comedians, these women, they think this is about getting Bernie Sanders elected. Like they don't. Everything is about political movement, and there's Marx again, right? There's your group political action as sort of. I mean, it's bigger than Marx, and I should probably stop mentioning Marx until I've understood him better. But
well, I read the Communist Manifesto and I went, well, this looks nice in 1889.
I don't think it does look good in 1889, but I have the context of sort of seeing what went wrong in the sagas of philosophy leading up to Marx.
Yeah.
So my main problem with Marx is not even communism. It's the idea that a person does not exist on his own, that a person is only part of a group, that his logic is just either proletariat logic or
it's all hive mind, my dude.
Quasi logic. Yeah, it's all hive mind, and that's how people are talking. Like, why aren't there more women in your story? It's because everything needs to be about groups, and women are an oppressed minority, no matter what. Until we see them until everyone sees a woman exactly like they see a man,
which is never going to happen, logically speaking.
I mean, it's really, and this is sort of like stage 4 of wokeness. Like you need to ultimately see that this is a war on reality. This is nihilism.
When people are like, there's no differences between men and women, and my first thought is, well, women can have babies.
Mm-hmm.
Explain that, feminists. Try me.
But then they're going to say that biologically there's men and women, but basically other than the ovaries and the penis, it's pretty much all a social construct. That's what they would tell you.
Other than physical reality, there's no difference. Well,
they would
maybe, but
look, they speak out of every side of their mouth. On one hand, these social justice warriors are saying that you're basically a blank slate because society they conditioned you to think like your gender role or like your racial role and all that. On one hand, you're a blank slate. On the other hand, you're born guilty. If you're white, this is all your fault somehow. So it's like, on one hand, you're determined by your identity, and your every choice you ever made is determined. On the other hand, you're a blank slate. You were trained to do this, and it's your fault and you're also a victim of it. Look, ultimately they don't want answers. These are not people saying, here's our solution. And
they just want a solution.
they don't even want a
have
solution. They don't even want a solution. They want action. They want destruction. They want to say what we have now needs to come down.
They want what the unification board wanted.
Absolutely. Well, at least with the unification board, you had these power lusters who wanted to rule over people. Ultimately, they were setting it up so they can never succeed for very long, or that I guess they were setting it up so that they can ride other people's work as long enough until their life is over.
A better analogy of the social justice types would be what's his name? Taggart Tunnel. Kip Chalmers. Is that it?
Mm-hmm.
Am I wrong?
Yeah, so Kip wanted to get through the tunnel and get to his appointment, so he evaded reality. He didn't care how dangerous it was, and then the tunnel crumbled on him.
The catastrophic results. Yeah.
Everyone was just evading because they've been taught, don't think, or you'll get blamed for whatever happens.
Yeah.
And don't think, just do. I mean, and I think you're obviously enjoying Rand's work, which is, I think, the best sign that you're kind of open to her ideas. There should be an emotional reward. I think that's very sort of consistent with her philosophy. That reality and your emotions should be in line. So you should check out. Oh, you'll love this. Thank me later. The Anti-Industrial Revolution is the name of her other nonfiction book, and one of them.
Okay.
It was originally called The New Left, and then the subtitle is The Anti-Industrial Revolution, and then it was re-released more recently called Return of the Primitive. So I haven't read the updated version. It's got like a few new essays, I think, by Peter Schwartz. Who's an objectivist, but the New Left. I read this. I came across it at my community college library, and I had read Atlas Shrugged, so I was sort of like in the same position as you a couple weeks ago. I read Atlas. I thought it was very powerful. Didn't quite understand what this has to do with me, what this has to do with the world around me. I knew my professors were full of shit, but I couldn't quite tell you why. So I found The New Left in the library at this community college, and I flipped it open, and like in the introduction, Rand is explaining this is really a collection of essays that will help you get through school if you're going to go to school. And I was like,
I needed that a year ago.
And it begins. The first chapter is about the Berkeley protests. You hear all these people talk about, the free speech movement. What happened to Berkeley? That used to be the free speech movement. And Rand is just like, no, here's what's really happening at Berkeley. It was violent, it was unorganized and nihilistic. But most importantly, and Rand is the only one who points this out, these students were acting on what they were taught. These students were sucking up to the professors by attacking the professors. They were doing exactly what the professors taught them. And that's something to keep in mind when you see the social justice warriors, when you see what Black Lives Matter, whatever it is, whoever it is that's starting a fire and doing shit, these are people who are doing what they were told. They were acting on the ideas. And these ideas of nihilism are, they have a tradition in philosophy. This is what is taught. You're taught not to think. You're taught that your thoughts mean nothing. There's so much that you were taught either implicitly or explicitly.
One of the first red flags I got at university was I was reading. Have you read any of Roland Barthes?
No.
Thank God. We read Death of the Author. And one of the points he makes is that an author cannot own anything he makes because he did not invent the language to create it. And I went, what? Like, okay, intellectual property rights aside, what the fuck does that mean? Like, if I speak English, I can only communicate in English.
I don't know.
If I write something, what do you mean I don't own it? That's like telling someone who builds a house they don't own the house because they didn't build the hammer, the saw, the nails. It's like...
you'll see like libertarians speak this way. I don't know if that guy you mentioned, it might even be a libertarian. So it's very important.
I think he's dead now.
Well, what he might have been, or libertarians might refer to him as someone who had a point. So libertarians oftentimes reject the idea of intellectual property. And Very important, the distinctions between libertarianism and objectivism. These are two very different things. And if you don't quite understand what Rand is saying, you could end up being a libertarian, or if you focus too heavily on politics, you might mistake her for a libertarian. But it's the lower levels of philosophy that make all the difference. So, so this disintegrated gentleman you mentioned, who says you don't really own what you invented because you didn't invent fire and then invent agriculture and then invent the language and then invent, you know, this and conduct the French Revolution and then come to, you know, just like
that sort of extrapolation is bullshit.
Well, it's important for legal scholars, I mean, and philosophers to explore these issues, but the conclusion he arrived at, I think, is disconnected from reality. It's almost like saying, like, the inventor of fire didn't really invent that fire because he didn't, you know.
He's not Zeus. Zeus did it, clearly.
Zeus did it. Or like his parents gave birth to him, so really they invented it. Or the cavemen, the Neanderthals before him, whatever they did to stay alive and to innovate in their own primitive way to avoid death, they really it's just so unintegrated, and it's just so aimed at doing away with the very features of life that is individualistic thought and focus, and he's just trying to negate that. So yeah, he's I mean, I disagree with him. I don't know that I have the intellectual ammunition to go up against him if he was alive, but I can tell you what he sounds like he's saying and why I disagree.
Yeah, I think you and I are on the same line there, because I just, as a writer, hearing that I don't own anything I write, it's like, well, that's dumb. You mentioned free speech. I have a question that kind of relates to that. Have you been following any of the Jawbreakers stuff? It's a comic book that's been kind of under fire yet recently.
No. I should ask my friend. No, I don't.
Okay, there was anyway. There was a independent comic book that's supposed to be coming out. It's being released on like small presses and things like that. And Diversity in Comics is the guy who's putting it out, and he negotiated to have a deal with a publisher, and then after pressure from a third party, they rejected his they said, no, we're not going to publish it. This is after they had a deal, as far as I can understand. So I know that Rand puts forth the idea that a venue cannot be forced by an individual to put him on a platform, which I agree with, because why would you finance someone you disagree with? But I'm curious if she might think, maybe you can help me out on this, if reneging on a contract might count as censorship in some capacity.
Oh, I mean, I think reneging on a contract is violating a contract unless the contract provided for that option. So I'm not familiar with the Jawbreaker case. So, and I'm also not a lawyer. I'm not a legal scholar. So I couldn't, in some of these cases, some of these freak sort of unusual cases, whether it has to do with property rights or has to do with other conflicts of interest. In many cases, I'll just have to kind of throw my hands up and say, like, let someone else answer that one for you, because I'm really like, that's not my job. That's not something I just as I defer to my medical doctor to sort of answer some questions. I can't tell you how to solve every case. I can only sort of speak about the principles at large. So in principle, if a contract was signed and does not provide for anyone to pull out, then the contract is signed. So I wouldn't really call it censorship or versus not censorship, but it's
versus an unethical business practice.
Yeah, it's contractual issue. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah.
But I just want to mention again, the people who say, like, you didn't invent anything because you didn't invent the language you're speaking. This is not exclusive to the left. This is very prevalent among libertarians. So it's very important, like, to know you're not speaking to a libertarian right now. And many libertarians out there, they're hostile to what it is that Rand was actually pushing. And many of them sort of expropriate her work and pretend it's their own, when they're evading the main points that she was making, which is the importance of reason as an individualistic pursuit and everything that sort of comes from that.
Okay. I'm looking at the second part of the script I've got here. Gods of Industry. Does that ring any bells? Where I was kind of compared, like, I mean, as a writer, I have to look at Atlas Shrugged and kind of be like, okay, these characters, as the average Joe, aren't very realistic. But at the same time, like that's what I get from my English courses. You have to write someone who's relatable, and Atlas Shrugged kind of turned that on my head. It's like, okay, these characters are they're Elon Musk, they're Jeff Bezos, they're these high tier industrial, well, like as industrial gods. Why do I like them so much?
Yeah, Elon Musk without the subsidies. And someone, if Elon was here, he might say, "Hey, look, man, we're all living in the same mixed economy, and the only way to get ahead is to take subsidies." And I would not know if he's getting more than he. Yeah, I would have a hard time, but I would like to hear him say that. I would like to.
Yeah,
he might have said that. I think somebody mentioned this to me, that he's sort of justified his subsidies as saying like, "Hey, you know, I didn't create the system. I inherited it." I don't know enough about Elon Musk. Anyway, I just kind of wanted to mention that. But so a couple points about Rand's novels, her art.
sure, yeah.
She believed, I mean, she championed romantic literature, romantic art. And she has another nonfiction book called A Romantic Manifesto. I know your book pile is getting kind of high, but
I need something to do in my spare time. Come on.
It's all electric, every word. So the Romantic Manifesto, she talks about what is art, and then what is the best kind of art, like what is the purpose of art. She says just as you would think, you would think someone as rational as Rand, right? Somebody as so focused on the importance of material production and material creativity in the material realm. How seriously is she going to take art, right? I mean, yeah, she is an artist and she loves art, but I mean, come on, right? The paper plate factory. That's what she says a man must create technology to live.
Yeah.
For his body to live. And then art is technology of the soul.
That makes sense.
So
I can see that.
So it's always very important not to neglect your body in favor of your mind, or the opposite, not to neglect your mind in favor of the body. We are both. We're conscious and we're material. You're right. We need abstractions and concrete. So what art does is there's so much one could focus on. There's like a million things both in the world and in your imagination. There's a trillion different images and ideas floating around. How do you know what to focus on? How do you know what's important? And then art, a work of art, it gives you an image as here's an essential. Here's the artist's depiction of what he considers to be an essential, or his stylization of reality, as in like, here's how reality ought to be. And here's something worth focusing on, something to inspire you. And at one point in the Romantic Manifesto, in the book, in one of her essays, Rand mentions Buck Rogers, which I think was like a children's spaceman, show in the 50s or 40s or whatever. And 50s, she was saying the message that this gives a little boy could alter his life forever, and especially in a culture where the adults are focused on such nihilistic art, such materialistic art. But a little boy has this spaceman to look at. And that kind of reminded me of, I've got this expensive print taken on the set of Power Rangers hanging up in my house. Like, what was it about the Power Rangers that spoke to me when I was a kid? And it gives you an image to focus on. And so of course, so that's kind of maybe the long way of addressing the one part about just like, are these characters realistic or not? It's showing you how people ought to be. It's showing you what's the ideal. So Rand, she contrasted romantic art with what they call naturalistic literature, where it's supposed to just be like, just a day in the life, just kind of like the
slice of life writing. It just aggravated me so much. I'm like, but nothing happens.
I think Steinbeck was a naturalist, and I know he gets a lot of credit maybe for his literary whatever, like, I mean, for being good at what he does. But what he does is, I read the Red Pony, I think it was called. It starts with the guy blowing his nose, And then in the second to last chapter, the main horse of the story dies. And then the final chapter has like nothing to do with everything that happened before that. It's just a shitty story. It's intentionally not a story because it's just another, it's just, this is real life. As if real life is necessarily mundane. And Rand, I love watching her like pick apart her colleagues in the world of literature. It really is, especially in the 20th century. She just loves to. She even talks shit about Hemingway in her Q&A. She says he doesn't understand women. But anyway,
I've read of Hemingway didn't know, so.
But
I do wonder if my comparison of her characters to Olympic gods was warranted or not, because I was taking a mythology course at the time, so it's like, well, I can see Reardon as being a god of steel because he's I don't want to say he's not a real person, but he's so elevated at the time, so elevated to a point of being a god that's like, okay, well, he has something to offer humanity that's miraculous, Reardon metal. So if we enjoy these stories of Greek gods, why like some professors I talked to would be like, why are you reading Atlas Shrugged? Why would you read something so selfish? And I'm like, I'm bored.
Yeah.
But it's like, what's wrong there? So
I like that. I like that, comparing these, characters to Olympians. And I suspect Rand was not that far from that. Or, maybe that's what she might, she could best respond to that. Maybe she did at one point.
Right.
But so these characters are clearly mortals. They are living, they're living on Earth, and they are behaving in a way that she thinks men ought to behave. Or they're on the journey towards becoming their ideal version.
Some sort of perfect being. Because I know she likes to portray man as a heroic being, which is great. I love that. I fucking love that. Any writer should love that.
Yeah, but you got the cynics amongst us who just laugh at that. They're just they're like, oh yeah, sure. And I think my friend Bosch, he's so when you mentioned Jawbreakers, and I said I should ask him. He's a cartoonist. He does like comic books and stuff. Bosch Foston. He once mentioned to me about this guy, Paul Krugman is an economist in the New York Times, and he mentions Ayn Rand way negatively. He brings her up way more than he needs to. Like he kind of consistently brings her up as like, oh great, look what Rand's economics brought us now. Like every time something goes wrong, like he blames her as if we're living in a laissez-faire.
I think Ben Shapiro's played that card too. Like I agree with her on this, but not economically. I'm like, why?
Right. Well,
explain, please.
I have a lot to say on Ben Shapiro, but Paul Krugman brings her up just to shit on her, and Bosch was saying, he goes, I think that Paul must have read Atlas Shrugged at one point and said he saw himself in the villains, and he never forgave Rand for that. and when you're describing your professors saying like, why would you read something so selfish? And when we're talking about how like some people sort of laugh at the idea of man as a heroic being, the way I see it is people, they're threatened by the idea that they could be more. They're threatened by the idea that greatness,
they're not doing enough,
that they're wasting their life. That is a tough pill to swallow, and a lot of people just don't want to face that shit. And they're cynics. Cynicism, it's like once you've taken the cynical route, I know because I did take it for a long time. It takes a lot of reflecting to really admit that I fucked up and I need to really, really turn this ship around. And,
I'm kind of there with the fact that I have a fucking creative writing degree, and it's like, what are you going to do with this? I don't fucking know, but I have this YouTube channel. But there's applications for technical writing and all that stuff. So I can be more than just someone who writes fucking sci-fi stories for a living. But it's I will say, for someone who's been told, English is useless, to read Rand's works, it's like, well, no, not so much.
Of course it's not useless in her case. Reading in general is great for you, but her ideas are life empowering.
I do want to know, since I spent a good chunk of the video on this. I think it's about a good, like, I didn't even keep track, maybe 12 minutes or so. But just Ragnar Danaskjöld.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think I did a good job with examining him, or do you think I missed the mark there?
I don't remember what exactly you said about him.
Well, he mentions his diatribe on how Robin Hood is not,
Yeah.
not necessarily good. I really took that to heart because I hadn't thought of that before Atlas Shrugged. I just looked at it and went, "Holy shit!" Because we're always fed this idea of Robin Hood is a morally good character because he steals from the good and gives to the poor.
Mm-hmm.
And after reading Atlas Shrugged, I went, okay, so what if he steals from a businessman and gives it to a junkie? Is that morally defensible?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it is.
Right. It's so what they're doing with the Robin Hood story is they're attempting to lump in honest businessman with dishonest aristocrats.
Yeah, that came up in Virtue of Selfishness too.
Yeah, and the package deal is the ultimate weapon of those who want to sort of disqualify Rand. They love, and in general, people that are dishonest, they love to package deal things together.
Right.
So they're packaging. So they're saying, yeah, it was legitimate for Robin Hood to steal from, lords and give it to the serfs who were enslaved.
Right, but that's not the same as stealing from a businessman, a rich businessman. Of course, they don't make the differentiation between stealing from the state and stealing from the rich.
Mm-hmm.
It's all lumped into one, and it's like,
yeah, and
now it's like, wait a minute.
And when people reject the role of philosophy, when they reject the importance of ideas in a person and in a culture, if then they just see a society where some people are rich and some people are poor, and they say, "Oh, great! It's the Middle Ages, and now a different batch of people are rich and the others are poor." So it's always just a class struggle. It's always some people getting screwed over by the others. When in fact, today, even with all of today's regulations and taxes and all that stuff that I don't like, even so, we are living in a drastically different system than in the Dark Ages or in medieval times. We have a system where people are still voluntarily trading and working for the employer they want to work for, and traveling and going where they want to go, and their standard of living is ever increasing.
Yeah.
As this conversation demonstrates, the fact we're able to speak in real time over however many miles are separating us, and the world is able to watch. I mean, our standard of living is always rising. So there's that.
Yeah, I having read Atlas Shrugged, having read the Fountainhead, all these things. Seattle is trying to pass a head tax. Have you heard about this?
Who?
Seattle.
Oh, a head?
The head tax, which is, I believe the constraints of the bill are, if a company makes over $20 million, they're going to be taxed for every employee they have. How stupid does that sound?
Right. So they don't hire more than 19 people? Is that what?
I guess that's what they're going for. I mean, I know my state's kind of fucked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and look, that's altruism. That's always
because I know the like the root cause of this head tax is to fight homelessness. I mean, you and I can agree that homelessness is bad, but okay, Ethris in the chat here says it's like a business is going to be taxed $275 a year for each employee they have.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't sound like a good solution.
I mean, there's so much wrong with it. The first problem being that it's a violation of the rights of the people who own these companies, and it will necessarily punish the people who work for the companies and the people who patronize those companies and benefit from those companies. But first and foremost, it's a violation of the rights of the people who created this company. Just as you have your show that you're running here, and I have my music, this person in Seattle has a company. I don't know at what point we just decide that his company belongs to the rest of us. When is it now at 20 employees, or is it at $1 million a year, 10 million a year? Like at what point?
What's the cutoff? Yeah.
So
I hear this.
It's cannibalism, and people laugh when you say that because they're like, "Oh yeah, we're cannibalizing a guy who lives in a mansion." We're still eating him. We're still we're cutting off his balls and we're breaking his ankles and we're taking shit away from him. And ultimately, it's going to hurt everyone, and it's a violation of rights.
No, I'm with you. I hear this with the $15 an hour argument up here because like I've heard people say, well, McDonald's can afford it. I'm like, well, yes, I work for a small company. If that goes into effect, suddenly my small company has to pay an extra like 50% in labor.
Yeah.
Why?
So I mean, the main point I think is important to get, and this sort of it struck me when I heard your book report, and I think you should continuously sort of remind yourself of this, is that politics is sort of the top branch of philosophy. It's sort of how we live among one another, but it rests upon the lower branches. So the primary sort of quest for truth begins with sort of what exists, and then how do I know, and then what's the proper morality to live by. That gives you not only the clarity, but also the ammunition to take on these violators of rights, rather than just falling into this argument over, this is not going to work. Falling into this sort of utilitarian, pragmatic argument over whether or not taxing them is a good idea for the rest of us. So and that's essentially what conservatives do a lot. They just argue about the pragmatism of capitalism. They argue that capitalism is the best system because it raises everyone's standard of living and it works the best, and all the other systems are inferior and clearly destructive. And they make that pragmatic argument. But then what do you do when someone wants to tax the very rich and tax anyone with 20 employees? What argument can they really make? Oh no, it's a slippery slope. I mean, nobody listens to that shit because that's not the
that's the sole point where I take Peterson's philosophy into effect, in the sense of, okay, capitalism is flawed, but it's better than gulags.
That's what he says, and I think that's the wrong way to go about it.
Well, maybe it is. Maybe it is.
Oh, it is the wrong way. I can speak with clarity.
Okay.
So capitalism is the moral system. Capitalism is the system where force has been extracted from the realm of human affairs. So capitalism is the system where you, the individual, is able to be moral. And when I say moral, I mean rational, and productive. So so capitalism is the system to strive for as the moral system to live on Earth. So the fact that Peterson sees it as sort of the best by default, or not the least terrible,
just better than others.
That's why he's never gonna succeed. As much noise as he's making, ultimately we're always moving away from capitalism in our culture, because ultimately the battle needs to be ethical. Really, it needs to be deeper than ethics. It needs to be epistemological. People like Sam Harris and Peterson and Richard Dawkins and all these guys need to be pound. They need to be beaten into the ground with ideas and exposed for their flawed thinking. That's the ultimate battle philosophically. But then culturally, I think the battle needs to be ethical. People need to rethink how they look at ethics. And the fact that Peterson sees capitalism as sort of like, it's not perfect, but I'll take it. That's because of altruism. That's because he still holds altruism as synonymous with moral. So since capitalism is the least altruistic, it's the most selfish system, he's saying it's sort of a necessary evil. Whether or not he calls it evil, he's saying in effect, capitalism is a necessary, flawed, evil system.
Okay. I do have kind of keep bringing up Peterson for this.
Chew on it.
But one of the points he brought up in his lecture when I was down in Seattle was that rats have discovered, that like fair play, the concept of fair play is hardwired into us. Do you think that has a play in economic exchange, in the sense of, like with capitalism, we rely on fair trade? Do you think that's an extent of fair play? We know when to recognize a bad deal or bad play. Does that make sense?
I mean, it makes sense that I know what he's saying, but I disagree
Okay.
with him so strongly that I have a hard time saying it makes sense.
Okay.
So Peterson is notorious for speaking about us like we're automatons. Like, oh, crabs used to climb on top of each other, or crabs were used to be crabs climbing on top of each other. So now in the workplace, we necessarily need to compete with one another. That is not an accurate description of crabs or of people in the workplace. Um, People in the workplace are trading. They properly should be cooperating and dividing labor and trading. I don't know how I'm going to say trading. They're consciously participating and voluntarily, reciprocally creating shit and trading. So
Okay.
we are not rats. If we do,
Right. That's obvious.
I mean, what distinguishes a human being, and this is something Rand gets into in The Virtue of Selfishness. What distinguishes a human from all of the other animals is that a human being's means of survival is reason, and also a human being is capable of reason. A human being is capable of choices, which the other animals are not,
Right.
and a human being is able of thinking abstractly. With the lower level animals, at most you can maybe train them to like know the difference between two different objects, but
Recognize the sound or say, rope versus ball. Yeah, I have 3 dogs, so I
yeah,
feel you there.
but it's such a pathetic accomplishment compared to what a toddler is able to conceptualize. I mean,
It is very base level.
I'm
Yeah,
not even
yeah.
sure if that parroting the word ball and this is even could even. I mean, yeah, they show signs of being able to recognize a ball when they see a new one they've never seen, but
Right.
I mean, this guy Charles too that I watch, TEW, you should check him out.
Okay.
I think you might he might help you sort of concretize a lot of these ideas. But
Okay.
he
Okay.
brings up the idea of a beaver building a dam.
Yeah.
So a beaver, it appears like a beaver is behaving like a person. It appears like the beaver is thinking conceptually. He's thinking, I'm going to build this abstract idea, this dam. I'm going to concretize it. I'm going to gather
Right.
sticks, build it. But then you have to ask, if that is what a beaver is doing, why doesn't the beaver do anything else? Why doesn't he build anything else? Why doesn't he talk to the other beavers about the fact that he just built that? Why doesn't he? The only instance
Well,
where you see this happening is him building this particular thing.
to add to that, why do all other beavers do it automatically?
Right, because it is automatic in the sense in that it's a series of reflexes. It's that
Yeah.
evolution gave the beaver this very strange trait of this habit of building a dam through a
Yeah.
series of reflexes,
There's the biological element. Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
why this species was able to survive. The ones that don't do that get washed over, or they have to go somewhere else. So,
Okay.
so that's a beaver building a dam. Same with a bird building a nest, right? A
Yeah.
bird, if a bird was an architect, he would plan out cooler shit than just a nest, and he would talk to the other birds about building something cool. They would build a series of nests, and they would have a homeowners association that they meet.
Yeah.
They don't. They build nests through evolution. So, but the human being, we are not rats and we are not crabs. We think abstractly. We're capable of thinking abstractly.
Yeah.
And we must think abstractly in order to live for any significant amount of time, in order to attain set goals and accomplish them. So I think Peterson is way too fixated on this, similarities with the animals. I think he's largely missing the point. And this is, evolutionary psychology at large, in my impression of it, is that it is
Okay.
largely a result of the divorce of science from philosophy. So, way back when, a couple hundred years ago, science or philosophy gave us science. Philosophy, the discovery of reason, Aristotle gave us the scientific method in its modern form. However, the fact that philosophy became such a shit show is why scientists, they don't even recognize reason as this individualistic pursuit anymore in many cases. So you have now
Right.
evolutionary psychologists explaining human behavior, like, oh, what causes us to do this? You speaking right now is evidence against evolutionary psychology. You speaking right now is evidence that a person can think, he can focus, he can assess his options, and he can make choices, and he can think abstractly. So I'm very skeptical of most psychology today. I'm very skeptical any science which sort of ventures into the realm of psychology or deals with things that sort of go beyond what you can test with certainty. So so with Peterson, look, I don't hate the guy. I've done a couple videos on him. I love the fact that so many young people or people of all ages, especially men, guys who have been slobs, that they're being inspired to clean their room and get their shit together. I think that's a wonderful indicator of where we could be heading in our culture, which benefits me and benefits you, and could in effect save the world in the sense that I'm thinking of, in that the proper philosophy ends up being popularized. However, I like to focus on our differences. I like to focus on what it is that Peterson is wrong about, and
that's good. I've heard it often postulated that what Peterson needs is not fans or adversaries, but a good student, someone who can agree with him, but hit him when he's wrong. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, okay, like I can see what you're saying, but like, okay, have you thought about X, Y, and Z? That kind of a thing.
I think Peterson is not maybe the original thinker you might think he is, or that people his fans.
Well, university campuses. That's like, oh my God.
No. So he's unusual. He's unusual in the culture of universities in that he's challenging the social justice advocates,
the collectivism that's present. Yeah.
But what Peterson actually brings to the table philosophically is not unique to him, and it's not unique. There's nothing.
Right.
He's not an originator. He's not an innovator. He's not going against he's not swimming upstream, or he's not going against the grain, whatever metaphor you want to use. Philosophically, he falls neatly into the line of philosophers that one could identify. So another book you might want to check out is The Ominous Parallels. This one is by Leonard Peikoff.
Okay, name rings a bell. Yeah,
it is a heavy one. So I gave it to Sargon about a year ago. He read it, and it affected him for a while. He was really sort of shook up by it, I think. And I spoke to him about it, so you can go back and watch the on his Thinkery channel. Me and him had a conversation about that book.
I'll look that up. If I was willing to begin a liberal arts school and look at Atlas Shrugged, then hey, bring it on.
So what Leonard Peikoff does in his book, in effect, is he demonstrates how philosophy shapes history. The way he puts it, ideas are the motor of history, and he basically,
I can see that.
He shows you how Germany became Nazi Germany, and how America is following what Peikoff considers to be a similar path with some key differences, such as that America has Aristotle as sort of its originating philosopher, whereas Germany never had that. Germany went right from, I think, from like medieval times into sort of modern industrial society, but philosophically, they never had an enlightenment. They never celebrated reason, as in its Aristotelian style frame. So I think you'd love that book. But I mean, the reason that comes to mind is that this whole idea of like, evolution, evolution is what's driving us, or that we're driven by evolution. I mean, this was happening 150 years ago, and
I think we're driven by evolution to some degree, but not completely. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I don't think we are. I mean, I think we're shaped by it. I think who we are today comes from evolution, of course. I don't think there's anything mystical or supernatural about human being having consciousness, but evolution gave us consciousness. Evolution,
it leads to that point. Yeah.
Evolution said, think or perish, and what we choose, what we think is up to us. We
chose to not live in trees. Thank you very much.
I mean, even the choice to live in a tree would be a choice, because we're not monkeys who just automatically are swinging from trees through a series of reflexes. We need to choose where we're going to live, what we're going to do. And this is an individualistic thing that needs to happen. Every person needs to think, or needs to follow someone else who is thinking, but somebody needs to think. And that is a function of the individual.
Yeah.
So, I'm always suspicious of saying, that evolution is still calling the shots. I'm always suspicious of anything remotely close to that. But also, I'll say, like, I'm suspicious of psychology in general. I believe in psychology. I do believe.
Oh shit! You're locking up.
Am I there? Am I here? Are we there? You got me? You hear me? You hear
Testing.
me?
Yep.
You hear me?
Suspicious of.
I'm suspicious of
There
a
we
lot
go.
of
There we
what
go.
you hear me? I'm suspicious.
Yep, we're good.
I'm suspicious of a lot of what comes out of the world of psychology, and I do believe in psychology. I want to be clear. You know,
Right.
people say, "Oh, Rand rejects science. She rejects psychology." No, she embraces all of these things, but she is not letting it be packaged. She's not letting science be packaged with bullshit. She is saying science needs to be preserved and to retain its prestige. So
Yeah,
I think psychology is a very young study. It's a very young science.
relatively. Yeah, I mean, Freud was what? Okay, Jung and Freud were what? Less than a century ago, if I'm not mistaken.
They were largely confused, and they in turn were influenced by philosophy being at the stage that it was. I think Freud was in Germany when in this culture that never had an enlightenment.
I think Jung, Jesus fucking Christ, I can't pronounce shit. Jung was he's got some value on what dreams mean. I think he's got some value there, but at the same time, you can't quite confirm it. It's
right. Now, keep in mind when Freud is telling you about how your unconscious is making all these decisions on your behalf. Now, keep in mind, Freud is living in Germany, a place that never had an enlightenment, a place that never had any respect for reason in its Aristotelian frame. So be suspicious already of Freud. And then the fact that Freud is sort of the modern father of psychology. Be suspicious of a lot of what came after him. We want to be very honest when we look at people. And I think philosophy is what's missing. Philosophy is what's going to make psychology possible, but it's very difficult. I think psychology is going to be the most difficult because it requires the scientist to be honest about his own quirks and his own behavior and his own approach to things. He needs to be honest with himself, which is very difficult to get out of people, especially intellectuals.
I suppose it depends on the science. I mean, like, okay, I don't expect physicists to be dishonest because they're having to deal with object reality. Like, okay, how does this atom function in this environment? But physicists, chemists, I can't distrust them just on my own thoughts. But
but look at what happened in the evolution. The evolution, pardon the phrase, of science. You had Einstein, who was of the rationalist tradition. He was sort of removing his equations from reality and sort of taking them off into his own little imaginary world. And his equations were able to be used for technology, but a lot of the things that Einstein believed were sort of out there in imagination land. And then you had other scientists who disagreed with Einstein, who were wrong for maybe the opposite reason. They were more too focused on concrete reality and not applying abstract principles. And you had what are they called? The mechanics, whatever.
I can't think of the name.
They're wrong, so it doesn't matter.
It's there.
I mean, quantum mechanics,
quantum physicists. Yeah, okay.
So my understanding is that at a certain level, at a certain size, they don't think there's cause and effect anymore. So like a sliver of an atom could be in two places at once or something like that, which of course flies in the face of all laws of logic. It flies in the face of everything we know about the world. But I think they're saying because we don't have the tools to identify this before it's moved somewhere else, therefore it could be in both places at once, which is so rationalistic, such a primacy of consciousness. I think, therefore I am, like the world revolves around what I think. Such bullshit. So yes, we can get a lot of useful knowledge from what the quantum mechanics came up with in their equations, but in their fundamentals, of course, they're lacking philosophy. So this is a perfect example of where philosophy is needed by scientists, and its absence leads them astray.
I think we disagree here. Just because I'm willing to give physicists and chemists the benefit of the doubt because this is a field of science that you and I don't know too much about. I mean, maybe you do. I don't.
I don't either.
But okay, so like physics, it's like at some point when you get into particle physics, it's like holy shit, what the fuck. But
yeah, but what did I just say that you disagree with as far as saying that an atom can be in two places at once?
Well, I'm really fucking bad at math. I get what you're saying, like, but when someone is trying to decipher, okay, maybe this can be true or not, then I'm free to just let them do their own thing and be like, okay, get back to me when you're done. Is it true? Is it not true?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It does, but I'm saying now you have the context of knowing that how the history of philosophy has and the detour of philosophy, the way that philosophy was divorced from reason, even though reason is supposed to be the animating, the important fundamental of philosophy, reason was divorced from it. So anyone out there who's still attempting to use reason no longer thinks philosophy has to do with them, or vice versa. Anyone dealing with philosophy doesn't think reason is relevant. So now that you have the context of, and hopefully you'll start to see how this phenomenon seeps into the other departments of the university. Right. So look, I'm not the one who can explain you what's wrong with quantum mechanics or what's wrong with Einstein, for God's sake.
Right.
But
we're not the
but I can tell you, listen, just the fact that there's disagreement, that there's disagreement among schools of physics tells you that one of them has to be wrong. So it is possible.
True.
It is possible to be led astray and to be mistaken, even in something as impersonal as physics. So I was only trying to explain how without philosophy, even physicists, even people studying something as impersonal as physical matter could still
there has to be that baseline.
They can still dupe themselves. So I think reading Peikoff might be like a whole new world opened up as well.
Okay.
He's no Rand, but I'd be very proud to have.
I mean, when I'm cutting onions in the kitchen, I need things to do besides that. So
yeah.
I got a question from Discord here. What are your thoughts on Fallout? If art is supposed to show the ideal of mankind, is there a place for dystopia?
I'm assuming Fallout is the video game, which I've never played.
Same one. Yep.
I'm guessing that it's about a dystopian future.
Yep. Post-nuclear radiation, all that fun stuff. Like,
so I don't
like if the 1940s went wrong. Let's put it that way.
Well, they did go wrong. Just look at what happened. No. It's what I mean, what's the question? Like, I think if an artist wants to kind of go there, that sounds like an interesting place to go, I guess. Maybe not that interesting to me because I'm just not that into that. But
I guess it's not so much ideal so much as the worst case scenario. Does that make sense?
Well, here's what I don't like. It's situations like The Walking Dead where no matter what, you can't make the right decision. You cannot be rational. Basically, you're on a lifeboat, which is what these situations are like. When there's
that came over true. Yep.
Yeah, there's anarchy and there's gang rule, and it's like and life is one big series of Sophie's choices. And I think we're way too focused on that in our culture. We asked way too many questions on would you rather lose an arm or a leg, or would you rather kill one baby or kill 3 adults? And it's just so fucking. It's there. I mean, you read Rand's essay on lifeboat situations. Like it's there for a reason. These moral philosophers know what they're doing when they jump right to that. They're trying to separate. They're trying to separate morality from practical reality. They're trying to tell you that moral questions are not about how to live your actual life here in this timeline. They want to take you to the Holocaust, or they want to take you to the Titanic lifeboat, or they want to take you into the dystopian future. So look, if we're living in the dystopian future, my main goal is staying alive, of course, and then I want to link up with some other rational people and live together and find a safe environment and protect ourselves and start to trade voluntarily and start to rebuild. And of course, rationality is what's required to do that. So I guess that's the answer I can give. I don't think that just focusing on the misery and the
hopelessness, let's say, or
I don't
whatever
think
it is.
that's a very I don't like that. It's always made me uncomfortable how people just love to just kind of stay there. I think it's making a statement about the world we do live in. It's saying just like that, that's the world we're living in. There's no way to really live, and certainly psychologically, we're wired to be miserable rats. And
there was an interesting question that Fallout 3 posed with one of its expansions, which was like you have this child that's born in a diseased society, but this child has a excuse me, too much beer. This child is born with a gene that gives it immunity to a certain disease. So your choices are to let the kid live among the elite in order to cure the masses, or to give the kid to the masses in order to start an uprising. And I thought, at the time, I was like fucking 13. I'm like, holy shit! But now it's like, I'd let him live. I wouldn't give him to the masses. I'd be like, no, cure the masses, please.
The whole question is crazy. Like, who am I in this scenario? What am I, a philosopher king just moving people around like matchsticks? Am I Joseph Stalin? What's happening here?
Yeah, they just dump it on you. It's like, okay, kid.
And Peterson talks about, oh, you think if you were Joseph Stalin, you wouldn't kill all those people? Sure you would. And if you wouldn't, you would get stabbed in the back by someone who would. And it's like, wait, hold on a second. How did I become Joseph Stalin? How did I become a dictator of a communist country? Like, you're just putting me in this situation and telling me how I would behave in that situation? There's so much context that went into that. Tell me what he means.
I think the rationale there is only that every time communism is tried, it ends up the same way.
Yes, you're right. That is what he's saying. He's saying communism will fail. You're right.
That's about all I've got, though. Yeah, like, I know people say we haven't tried to deal with communism. Like, well, that's not the point. The point is it ends the same way.
Yeah, and I think one of his mistakes there is to say, even if you would be a benevolent dictator, the malevolent dictator would put a bullet in your head and take over. But that's such a non-essential. The essential, I think, is, and I'll let you stick up for him in a sec, but the essential is that being a dictator is a violation of both your own purpose and it's of course a violation of the rights of the people you're dictating.
Right.
Yeah.
This is going to sound retarded, but I'm going to pitch it out there anyway. I think that Galt was a benevolent dictator in the sense of, hear me out.
I'm listening.
Galt is what everyone deferred to in Galt's Gulch, but he gave everyone the choice to negotiate whatever job they wanted, as long as it made them happy. The gold standard was sort of secondary. You had the guy who was running the oil derrick. I forget his name. He was like, all this oil is mine. Was it Wyatt?
I would assume. I'm guessing
I think it was Wyatt. But
that's what he did back in...
The point of Galt's Gulch was not do what makes you rich or makes you powerful. Do what makes you happy.
There's a number of things there.
There's so much wrong with that statement.
Well, hold on. The main point of a dictator is that he's telling you what to do. So I don't.
Right, and Galt was not doing that. I mean, he was.
Yeah, I don't think there was that much told about how everyone picked their job. I don't remember.
That wasn't really explained. So
yeah, so I mean, everyone has what they want to be able to do, but they're sort of in the meantime. You got the guy with the supermarket, and you got the girl fishing. I don't know if you noticed, but she was a very random character to throw in there.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah,
it's like so random. All the other people that they meet are characters we've seen earlier in the story. And this random lady is fishing, and she's clearly in love with John Galt, and that's Rand putting herself in the story, by the way.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I don't remember reading about like how anyone picked their job. So I don't think, and the Gulch is owned by Midas. So this started by Galt going there, I think, or discovering the place.
I just said that because Galt seemed to be the de facto authority in a sense. Like
But he's not.
everyone just kind of regarded him as being really, really high up the chain, let's say.
I mean, he's like if you and me and a bunch of YouTube objectivists, got
It's a very limited number.
I mean, whatever. We're moving together. Some of them might treat me like I'm the YouTube leader, but that doesn't mean they're doing what I say. So like,
right,
they all regarded Galt as kind of like the hero who came up with this magnificent philosophy that freed them in more ways than one. But they don't actually do what he says. Well, he's the mechanic. They call him when they need him to fix something.
It freed them compared to the collectivizing state outside Galt's Gulch, the rapidly collectivizing state. I'm coming at this from a literary angle more than a philosophical angle.
I mean, these characters are meant to be conscious,
right? Yeah, no, I get that. I understand that. Yeah.
So, what makes you say that he's in any way dictating?
That's what I mean by it's the wrong way to put it. He's not a dictator, right? That's but everyone is like, oh, like in the book, everyone's like Galt. I know that Midas owns the place, but everyone kind of holds him above themselves. That's not to say he holds power over them. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's just like everyone, like Dagny defers to him when she's trying to negotiate the terms to which she becomes his housemaid. That's not to say she. God damn it, words.
No, I mean,
I'm confused.
I mean, yeah, I know it can be confusing. I'm rereading it now, so I'm not even done rereading it with a fresh set of eyes. But I did read the part about Atlantis and how things are go over there, and she negotiated with him. I mean, clearly he had a grip on her psychologically. She was madly in love with him, but but there's no, of course, it's voluntary trade is the principle.
Right. I think I got the impression that Galt was, just because everyone held him in such high regard, he was kind of overseeing everything, even though that might not be the case. I'd have to reread Atlas Shrugged. I really do, because I put that in my review as I need to reread this because I think I missed some.
Well, I would recommend sort of circle back to it, now that you've read The Virtue of Selfishness, keep reading and sort of maybe circle back to it at some point. It's very interesting for me. I reread The Fountainhead a few years ago. Yeah. Actually knowing the sort of the principle, and Dominique is so disillusioned with people. This time I understood from the get-go what it is, what qualities she's looking for in people, and why the people around her are so disappointing. So it is interesting to kind of read these books, kind of understanding the philosophy going into it.
Yeah, initially, like, The Fountainhead really struck me. Like, so much so that I was like, okay, I'm going to take Rourke's testimony and I'm going to record that, like myself reading that. It's on my channel, but like,
interesting.
That the whole bit of he's going on and on about how evolution, and at the end he ends with no man has the right to a minute of my time. I believe I might have misquoted that, but that was sort of a click. It's like, no, you can't make me do what you want.
Yeah.
It was magical.
Oh, that speech, the Rourke speech. I mean, like read the first sentence about someone invented fire and he was burned at the stake. I just stopped reading it. I was like, this is like I wanted to savor the moment. I was like, and like I was wondering if like, am I? I was a very very unhappy teenager. I remember like asking myself like, is this it? Like, am I never going to be sad, like depressed again? Is this going to solve all my emotional problems? I mean, it was the first step towards solving my problems. But of course, I needed to understand and integrate these ideas, not just have a powerful experience. We're always looking for a closure. We're always looking for a car crash. We're looking for some major event, like in the movies, where then like it changes you forever. When in reality, it's ideas that make all the difference. So discovering the right ideas and then integrating them by repetition, by understanding them further, by acting appropriately. That's really how happiness, I think, is found, which of course it includes setting goals and accomplishing things.
Yeah.
and all that.
That was such a radical departure from just like the fucking university. That's what I've been told in university is you need to, represent X, Y, or Z group because you're this skin color. I'm like, why?
Exactly.
Okay, it sounds nice. All right, whatever. Give me a fucking reason, please. Just that's what I want. Like, give me a reason as to why. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it. I'm lazy.
I mean, the word why is how Rand approaches altruism. Just why?
No, that's the big thing. Is
Yeah.
we had a bulletin board where people would be like, "What do you want to see from society?" And someone put more altruism. I'm like, no, stop that.
Well, but you want to really understand what Rand is saying.
I think
you want to really understand, lest you end up sort of challenging altruism without quite knowing what it is you're challenging. I think.
Yeah.
I would recommend that.
I don't regard altruism as good because it's so self-sacrificial that it's like, what am I going to get out of it besides emotional gratification? Like, well, that's not going to pay the bills.
Well, hold on. You're already making mistakes there. So the emotional gratification is something you get out of helping people, but altruism is self-sacrifice. It's sacrifice. You're getting nothing.
Right.
You're getting something less, or you're getting nothing at all. So
lesser value for a greater one.
I mean, yeah, I can do something nice for someone and get emotional gratification, and it reminds me that I'm a sweetheart.
Like with this channel.
Well, in a sense,
we can laugh at that. Come on.
We can, but I'm in intellectual mode right now. You can tell by the glasses. In a sense, what we're doing here is we're both voluntarily partaking in something that's not paying us money. And we are doing it for the spiritual reward. We're doing it for the character building and the skill development and the clarity. I mean, look, I've learned things by talking to you, even though I'm sort of playing the teacher as the one who has studied these ideas more. I'm gaining clarity. So there's always, look, I mean, in the realm of human affairs, there's so many rewards that you get that you don't even realize. But altruism says the purpose of morality is to sacrifice. The moral ideal is misery and death. That is what to strive for. The people we ought to look up to are Jesus and, whoever else suffered senselessly for the crimes of others.
Akeem, who blew himself up last week. That one.
I don't even know who that is.
I'm just throwing shit out.
I mean, suicide. Well, even with like suicide bombings, the fact that they need to promise them 72 virgins tells you something about Islam that's not as altruistic as Christianity.
Good example of altruism, Gandhi.
Even though it is, I think it's a great example of ideas driving a person's action. So the fact that this person believes in Islam so strongly that he would blow himself up, that tells you something. But in altruism in particular, and there's certainly altruism at play, the fact that they're putting the Muslim cause above their own individual interest. But nonetheless, the fact that this terrorist is being promised virgins in the afterlife, at least there is something in it for him. So
there's some gain,
the principle of cause and effect and reward and all that. But Christianity would tell you, go blow yourself up and you get nothing for it. That's what a Christian terrorist suicide bomber, if that were to ever happen, he would blow himself up. But I think Christianity also tells you turn the other cheek. So it's not, you're less likely to be strapped with the suicide vest by Christians, although, you never know. Religion could take you all types of places.
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking of going places, I got some plans I got to get to, but it's been a lot of fun. I'd like to continue this another time.
Yeah, maybe, sure, man. Maybe we can arrange another date. Let's
do it. Let's let me know what you read next. I'd love to maybe review it and we can keep this going.
Sure. Leonard Peacock. Shoot me the titles over Twitter, just either the DMs or just through tweets, and we'll.
Yeah, sounds good.
I would love stuff to read, and I'm like objectivism is something I'm very, very, very curious about, because it's so against what I learned in university.
It's against everything you've learned.
A lot.
Period. It's against things you learned in preschool, and you will understand that the more you dig.
All right, sounds good. All right, I'll let you go, my dude.
Cool. All right,
it was great to have you.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
I appreciate it. I really do.
Yeah.
So,
Peace.
later. All right. So, was I too much of a yes man? Oh man, that was great. That was fantastic. I had fun. All right, chat. I am so sorry that I didn't get to your questions. Ruck is a busy guy. I don't want to keep him for too long, but yeah, you can talk to me now. See, that was the good thing is I think Rucka acknowledged that he was. I'm the student. He's the scholar, even though he's not much of a scholar. But I think it was constructive. It was really constructive. Suggestions for here. I'm reading the chat here. God damn it. Why do I say I'm lazy? Because I am. Because I work like 12 hours a day and I don't want to do things after I'm working. It's so I like to take shortcuts, my dude. But not nervous, just drunk. But I think well, I had some beers to kind of quell my nerves, and they worked too well. But to fit in the question of Fallout, I think that's an important one though, because I didn't get to ask him about art and how there's words, but nevertheless, I appreciate him coming on and talking to me. Like honestly, like once I someone with 126 subs, it's like holy shit, and we had a good conversation. I think we had a good conversation. Even if he did most of the talking, I did this less to combat and more to get enlightenment from, because I really do like objectivism. I really do like what Ayn Rand has to offer. It something about it clicks with me. Maybe it's because I'm working a fucking 12-hour a day job, but uh, it clicks. It really clicks. Sleeping Stream Buck, you're gonna get it. You're gonna get it here. So, chat, talk to me. What do you got? What do you got? Art is subjective, and but going, Eth, I know you've read Virtue of Selfishness, and I think going back to the lifeboat question, I think that Fallout poses a lot of lifeboat questions. Listen, Sonny, I just want him to orally violate me. Aaron Shaw. I don't know enough about objectivism to take it seriously. Not that I reject it, I desire to know more intensifies. But my job does pay well. I would get paid $14 an hour plus event pay, which is elevated. Plus, it's a family-owned business, and my family really cares. Oh shit. Nightwing. I Bioshock was on my list. I couldn't squeeze it in because I was too busy listening to the man. I like him. I want to learn more from him. I appreciate him coming on. All that fun stuff. Real quick. You see, Aaron, I'm I manage the kitchen, which means I do everything the kitchen has to do, and my boss does everything else. Um, I don't consider it slavery because it is a family-owned company. So I'm working to benefit my family, not just myself. And as grueling as the hours can be, uh, the commute is beautiful. Rucka. Just call it Bucka, and we're good. Spelled Bakka. But no, I mean, if I in my drunk state could convince Rucka to come back on, then hey, we can have a chat. And I like that he like. Paul, if you're still here, I know that like you mentioned, Rucka's going to be very adversarial or aggressive, but not only Diane, not only words. My intention was just to let him talk because he gets to explain these things that I haven't made the connections to. Like having him talk about what I got wrong with reciprocity and collectivism. I hadn't made those connections. I hadn't. Yeah, no. This has been enlightening. Like I don't feel insulted or anything like that. I'm just like, yes. So I'm gonna kill the stream here, but if anyone wants to talk to me more, I'll be in the YouTube Saints Discord, and we'll just be hanging out there. So all right, I will see you there.